Hello, I'm Shane Hendren with Rio Grande, and in this video, we're going to talk about Swanstrom disc cutters. Swanstrom disc cutters are known the world over for their reliability and their quality. They're often imitated, but they're never duplicated. Having this fantastic piece of equipment means you don't have to saw out discs by hand ever again. This disc cutter ensures you a perfect cut every time. So when you get your disc cutter out of the box, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to have this big black rubber band that you're not going to need anymore. You can take that off. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to turn this tightening handle at least a half turn to the left. And that loosens up the cutter, which is holding these punches in place. So you're going to want to put your disc cutter onto a sturdy surface, and I recommend using a piece of urethane to place your cutter on. This will protect your cutters from damaging the surface of the face, as well as getting crisp, clean cuts. So we pull it out and set it there. You see this punch right here got stuck? Now that's because it still has a little bit of that machine oil from the manufacturing process. All you have to do is take a good clean rag to wipe these down and wipe off that residue that might be on the equipment. Make sure that you use a clean rag. You don't want to introduce any dirt or any contamination to the equipment. Swanstrom cutters are angled and sharply ground, made of hardened and tempered tool steel for strength and durability. All of its critical surfaces are precision ground to exact tight tolerances, ensuring clean cuts and protecting the cutter against damage. So now we are ready to cut some discs with our Swanstrom disc cutter. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our metal that we're going to cut. I'm going to use this 24 gauge copper right here, and we decide which hole we want to use. I'm going to use this one. Make sure the disc cutter is loose. We position this piece of copper plate in the hole, and this is where the Bonnie Doon disc cutter shims come in handy. And you can see that they've clearly stamped on them the thickness. So this is 24 gauge because the copper sheet that I'm going to cut a disc out of is 24 gauge. Now keep in mind, to prevent scarring on your material, you can put paper on both sides of your copper. If you do that, you also have to put paper on both sides of your shims. That way it stays even. So you slip your shim into the opposing side. If this is the disc we're cutting, then you want it directly across. You'll tighten it down. The next thing is, I want to show you this brass-headed mallet. This brass-headed mallet is what you want to use when you're using the disc cutter. The reason being is this is a brand new one, looks perfect, but over time it'll start looking like this. Now, this is the head of your cutter, and you can see it's perfectly machined with the shoulders rounded off and everything. If you use steel against this, this can begin to look like this, the way this is mushrooming out and everything, and it can become very dangerous because that can break off and shatter and actually break this cutter. So what you'll do is you'll put that in there, make sure this is tight. You don't want to over tighten this. Bring this around. I'm right-handed, so I want this on the right to make sure that I don't hit that. That's the reason why we want the urethane underneath, because as you can see, gives us a perfectly cut disc, doesn't hurt the cutter, doesn't hurt the table. Precision machined from Delrin to fit into the Swanstrom disc cutter. The center positioning dies allow you to create beautiful centered washer-like components quickly and easily. Swanstrom disc cutters make center positioning dies for all of its different shaped dies, from triangles to ovals to rectangles to squares, hearts, and even teardrops. So we're going to cut a washer using the centering dies. The first thing we want to do is we want to think about how big we want the center of our washer to be. So this is the size that I'm going to choose. So what we'll do is we'll put our copper in here. I've got to loosen this up. Put our copper in here, and I'm going to use this larger one eventually as the total size for the washer. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I position it in such a way that I have enough room around. So I'm using 24 gauge, so I use the 24 gauge spacer. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down. Better make sure I put some burr life on there. The burr life will prolong the life of the cutter and keep everything smooth and clean. So that's our centerpiece. Save that. You can probably use it later for another component. We'll loosen this up, pull our shim out, turn things around here. Now this hole, we're going to want to position it so that we wiggle this around until we've got that where we know that it's centered. Put our spacer in, tighten that down. Okay, now I can't get this out because this handle is blocking it. So what you can do on this Swanstrom cutter is you lift it up and you can turn it completely out of your way. That doesn't loosen it or anything. Now we can take that out. Get my large punch. That fits in there. Gonna have to put some burr life on it here. And there you go. You can get it perfect every time, time after time. So here's a tip for you to reduce your cleanup and everything later on and work more efficiently. We want to reduce the amount of scratching and things that we get on our sheet when we cut it. So what you can do is you can take just regular copy paper and cover both sides of your sheet where you want to cut it and put it in there. Now make sure that you do the same thing on your shim, on your Bonnie Doon disc cutting shim. You line them up so they're exactly opposite of each other. Go ahead and tighten that down. Get our burr life on our sharp edge. And you can see the paper protected it, so there's no transfer marks from the cutter. That'll just save you a lot of time and energy down the line when it comes to cleaning things up. I got another tip for you, and what this has to do with is we get a lot of calls here at Rio about the cutter itself getting stuck. So you'll have pieces of metal in here, and when you loosen it up, it doesn't pop open like it just did there. And people have a hard time getting it open. All you have to do 90% of the time is take your brass-headed mallet and just tap the side of it, and usually that's enough to break it loose. Most of the time, the reason why it's stuck is you didn't use a shim on the opposing side, or it wasn't the right thickness, and it causes it, when you tighten it down, puts a bind on these guide posts here, and it locks it in place. So by tapping it, it breaks it loose, and it usually comes loose for you. So here's another tip. So these handles are made of hard plastic, and if you hit them, they can and will break. We sell replacement handles. So if you ever break your handle, contact Rio Grande and we can sell you a replacement handle. And the other thing is, over tightening is also an issue. You only need to tighten this handle tight enough to hold the shim and the sheet of metal in place firmly. You do not have to crank down on it. That's another way that you could potentially break this handle. So if you do end up with a broken handle, contact Rio Grande. We have replacements. So one more tip. This sunshine cloth is not only good for polishing your jewelry, but what can happen is over time, the burr life can build up a little bit of residue inside the cutter. So all you have to do is take that sunshine cloth, take your sunshine cloth and clean it out, just like that. You do that and it encourages your cutter to slide through there clean and easy. Okay, so over time, hopefully you're using burr life every time you use one of these punches that acts as a cutter, and that burr life will build up. The best thing you can do is you can just take an alcohol wipe and just clean that off periodically, because that will help protect and keep this surface clean so that you get good clean cuts every time. Okay, so the next maintenance tip I want to give you is the edges on our punches need to remain sharp and crisp. If they begin to round off, they're not going to give you clean cuts, and you'll end up with deformity on your discs that you're cutting. It's very simple on how we can protect or maintain these faces. What we're going to do is we're going to use a marker to cover the face, make it all black. Make sure you remove any residual burr life or anything from the face before you do this. Get everything. You're going to need a good steel block, no dents in it, good and flat. 240 sandpaper, some liquid burr life. Just need a couple drops of liquid burr life there. We'll rub that liquid burr life, spread it around on the surface there. Now remember, these punches, the angle on this punch is 5 degrees. So it's not going to sit at 90 when you put it on there. It's going to be at an angle. See that angle, how the punch is setting at an angle? The most important thing is we don't want to change that angle, because we want the face, the face of the cutter is what we're going to work on. And it's real simple. We just do a figure 8 pattern. And you can see, we look at this at the face here, because of the black marker, we can see where we're tightening it up and where we're sharpening it. We're just trying to get that edge crisp and clean again. The reason why we use the figure 8 pattern is because if we go in lines, it creates a scratch pattern on the cutter that can be transferred to your metal, but it also creates little burrs that will come off either end and can affect how it cuts. So we're not quite done. Like I said, make sure you keep the face flat. Perfect. So now all of our edges, when I look at them, they're all crisp and sharp again. There's no rounding, there's no gouges or anything. And if you do this every so often, your cutters are going to perform fantastic for years and years. Well, I hope you found this video informative. If you have any additional questions about Swanstrom disc cutters or anything else in our product line, please contact us.